Welcome, everybody, to the Untold History Channel. My name is Ron Partain, and I am joined today by Coach Mel, author of the Corporation Illusion: Unmasking 1871. It's a book that I read. Mom, I read most of it. I didn't read it all, but I read a good portion of it about 2-3 weeks ago. And we tried to do this last Wednesday, and it was a little bit. We had a little bit of a hiccup, so
Yeah, that was
we're
my
gonna
fault.
we're gonna do it again tonight, but and it's actually a bonus because tonight we are joined by the war hamster himself, Mr. Brady. How are you doing there, brother? Good to see you.
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure hanging out with you and my good friend Mel.
Yeah, it's been a minute. Well, I'm gonna put Mel into the big chair here because she's the kind of the star of the show here. Um, but you know what? Kind of what we're going to do here is we're going to do kind of a brief overview of stuff, and then once we get through with that overview, we're going to open the phone lines up and let people call in, and there will be some rules about the phone conversation. So, but that's coming. But for now, Mel, what would you like to start with in terms of a presentation?
Yeah, so I think we all are already on the same page about what the topic is, so we don't have to, basically restate it. But emphatically, the idea that America is a corporation is 100% false. And again, people start screaming at me and calling me a shill and a commie and all kinds of names just for making that statement. But I want people to know that we're on the same team, and we're bringing you information that we would love for you to say, okay, I'm willing to look at it and not be too emotionally tied one way or the other. Peer review, be critical thinkers about this, and let's just talk about it. And that's when the question and answer time is going to come. So please just be open minded. But so the idea of the corporation was started by, people with bad intentions. And, we can go into that. We don't necessarily have to go into the history of how it was started, but we can. But when we break down every one of the articles that is used and propped up to call or to supposedly be the evidence behind the United States being a corporation, every single one of them is dismantled as fake, phony, and false, or misconstrued, completely out of shape. So I'm willing to talk about every single one of the documents. Anybody can bring up any document concerning any of it, and we will be able to show you how it was crafted outside of truth or
Awesome.
misconstrued. So, yeah,
If you have it, and I've got 4 documents ready to rock and roll.
yeah.
Should you need them?
Okay,
So
let's start with the biggest, I think, uh, the biggest aha for most people, or they think is an aha, is the Act of 1871. So if you want to bring that up, the Act of 1871, just maybe just the first paragraph, and maybe like, what is it, number 9 or 10,
uh,
that
the
talks
Act of
about the oaths.
1871. Let's see here. Um, let's see, page 8. There's
Oh, are
9.
you in my book?
No, I'm actually not in the book, and this is
Okay.
the original document. But if you want me to pull the book up, I can.
No. I just was trying to figure out what was on here.
Yeah.
So while you're looking for that, in the very first paragraph of the Act of 1871, we're going to notice a couple of things. It's going to say municipal corporation, which I'll explain what that means. And first, I want to explain what an act is. And most people just go, oh, the Act of 1871 tied us to London and the Vatican, and it's this evil and nefarious thing that basically sold America to another country, to the Vatican, basically because of indebtedness over the war. And so all these evil people came in and basically took America. Well, first of all, War Hamster is going to show us how, in fact, we were not bankrupt, but we'll get to that in a little bit. An act is written by Congress. So we still have acts today. Acts are, we know in the Constitution that Congress was given. They are the of the 3 branches. They are the ones that can make law, and that is they can legislate, and that is what an act is. Be it enacted that. Okay, that's a law. Congress cannot make acts are not instruments that communicate with other countries. They're our American laws. There are United States laws have nothing to do with another country. If you want to negotiate with another country, you're doing that through a treaty, not through an act. An act doesn't do that. It's not capable of that. So the act right there, Act of 1871, means the law of 1871, the legislation of 1871. And the reason it says 1871, back then everything was in chronological order. So every act had two names. It had the Act of 1871, the Act of 1792, the Act of whatever. And then it also had like the Act, the Coinage Act, the Act to create a mint. They had two names so that they could try to find them, which gets into another topic later that we may get into or may not. You're welcome to ask questions about it, but why we went from common law to what we now have, which is codes and so forth, and statutes for our laws, which was basically our Dewey Decimal System for making a different way to be able to find laws more easily than it used to be in chronological order. So the Act of 1871, all it did, and you're at this first paragraph.
I have your book as well. If you want me to share this one instead, this is your page 9.
Yeah, neither one of those are the actual act. If you want to go to the appendix and find the actual first page of the act, I want to show the first paragraph.
This is the act, I believe. Here, I'll go to the very top. The 56th Congress Senate, District of Columbia by William Tyndall.
No, that's
not the act of 1871.
No, this is a pamphlet written by that William Tyndall. That's where we get into the street view of everything that was going on in government. But if you flip over to the appendix, you'll find the whole act.
I have your book, and where would you like me to go in your book specifically?
The appendix should have the entire act right in the appendix there. Okay. So the very first paragraph.
Not really legible.
Yeah, probably not. You're right. Hey Brady, if you can, I don't know if you can.
I've got it archived. It'll only take me about 30 seconds to find it.
Okay. So basically,
PDF. Do you have it in a PDF?
You can actually go to Wikipedia. If you can, just go to Wikipedia and go down to it's not documents.
I've got it.
Oh, you got it? Okay. Yeah, the very first paragraph tells us exactly what the Act of 1871 did, and it's not nefarious in any way, shape, or form. Has no dealings with London or the Vatican. If you read the entire act, I think it's like several pages long. There's nothing in it that has anything to do with London or the Vatican. Like nothing. So the way people get away with this is just by making you believe them so much that you don't even want to go and actually look at it. And that's the really unfortunate part of these things.
I found it on Wikipedia, like I asked.
Go ahead, Ron. I don't mind. Mine's not coming up as quickly as it should.
The District of Columbia Organic Act of 1871 is an act of Congress, or that's actually not the first paragraph.
Go down to the bottom where you have you can different things you can click on.
Okay, there's references.
References, yep.
Origin and government of District of Columbia.
Nope. Go down a little further.
American in Washington, D.C., 1800 to 1975. The original, 2000. See here, history of self-government. No,
go down a little further.
Okay. I don't see very well since my my retinal detachment. So
I think it's number 8.
You think so? Okay.
Yeah, right where you were. I think it was number 8.
An act to provide a government for the District of Columbia. Okay.
Well, that sentence right there tells you pretty much all you need to know.
We can't find.
I mean, we should be done. We can all say good night. It's
right.
An act for the District of Columbia. It has nothing to do with the United States of America.
Right. So to put some flesh on that, most of you live in an incorporated city, or unless you live in an unincorporated area, which when you're driving through rural America, you might see some areas where people have congregated, but it'll say something like the incorporated, whatever. And it just means that they have not said, hey, we want to become a city, and therefore we want to partner with our state and basically say, hey, write to the state, say we want to become an incorporated, which would give us, city water, city utilities, give us a government, give us a mayor, all of that. And so if you have a mayor in your town, you are incorporated. But that doesn't mean corporation like a private corporation for profit. It doesn't mean that someone's making money off of your city. It means a corporation, and Brady, you're really good at explaining this, but basically it's the entity through which the money changes hands. You got to pay your government. You got to, our taxation goes through it from us to them. It's the pipeline of accountability for them to then turn around and, you know, pay our government officials and to supply us with all the things. It takes money to have infrastructure like this. So when you think about the whole area of DC pre the Civil War, people were not supposed to live in that area that were just, you know, random citizens. You had to be working for the government to live there. But then the war happened and all these slaves just flooded into that area because, you know, there wasn't any slavery in DC. And there were still states, you know, the states were still slave ownership. And so they came there and they're like, we're not leaving, we're staying here. And so you have all these people here. Well, prior to them coming there in 1790, when they first built DC, and then they took the 10 years to build it and build the buildings and actually get everybody there. In 1801, they had the very first act to create Washington, DC. Why does no one yell about that one? Because it doesn't hold up the narrative.
Mel, hold on a second, guys.
Yeah.
We went to Wikipedia as a fail-safe last minute thing. That wasn't. We're not. None of us trust Wikipedia. So. Right. But that
the reason I had you go there, Ron, is just because it actually pulls up the one from the Library of Congress.
I'm just getting feedback like you guys you're talking about facts and you're using Wikipedia. So I understand the argument. So
no, as a matter of fact, thank you for saying that. Yeah, we don't trust Wikipedia. However, it has the link that takes you straight to the Library of Congress, which pulls up the actual document. That's the only reason I thought on the fly, because we were going to be reading from the actual Library of Congress, the actual document. However, yeah, I agree with you. Don't read any of Wikipedia's opinions, but it wasn't an opinion piece.
Right.
So anyway, the corporation, so when they first, in 1801, they had the very first act of Washington, D.C., of the District of Columbia, which basically all that did was created infrastructure. Now think about this territory. When Hamilton and what's his name, Madison
Jefferson. Then let me jump in. Because it's a really fun debate of where were they going to put District of Columbia?
Exactly, yeah.
And you've got Hamilton, who wanted a bunch of things above and beyond what the Constitution allowed, and you had Jefferson, who did not. And they were part of the argument, the debate with Washington about whether we should have the first bank of the United States. One of the deciding factors, some say, and this is probably not very well documented, but it's worth bringing up. Where they put the District of Columbia just happened to be right next door to Mount Vernon, I believe, is where Washington had his estate.
Right.
So that happened when they were choosing the location for this new municipality. It was a big negotiation. It was political. And two states had to give up their own sovereign territory and agreed to do that. And it made sense to them because if you have the capital right next to your city, there should be additional commerce. Prior to that, the capital of the United States was where, Ron?
Philadelphia.
God, you're smart. I knew you were going to know that. Go on, Mel.
Yeah, so basically they decided to build the territory there, and it had to be a territory, not a state, because think about states. States are sovereign. So you can't take the federal government and put it inside the state, because then it's going to have to answer to the sovereign state's laws and disenfranchise the other states. And so it's this catch-22 that doesn't work. So they had to have a territory that was free of being a state. So when people say, oh, it's foreign, and I called Jan Halper Hayes out on this publicly on a Spaces, and I've got it recorded and it's on my Rumble. And I made her tell everybody foreign did not mean owned by another country. They used to use the word foreign a little bit differently than we do now. But think about any of you who have a corporation, and a lot of people don't, so you may not know this. But if you have a personal private corporation, you have a business, whether it's profit, nonprofit, whatever, if you have it in your home state, and it's considered a domestic incorporation. But if you decide to open a satellite in another state, say you're in Missouri and you open one, it's your domestic corporation and whatever, you do all this stuff. If you then decide to go to Nevada and open another one, guess what it's called? It's called a foreign corporation. So the word foreign is used differently than what we think only as foreign, meaning another country. So when we talk about DC being foreign soil, it's really not used the way we use the word foreign anymore. It shouldn't really be in our vocabulary concerning this. It just means that it is not in a state. It's not part of a state. It stands alone. It's meant to serve the 50 states. It's meant to be the government for the 50 states. But back to the war, back to the Civil War, all these people moved in and they weren't really supposed to be there, but then they've got all these people. What are they going to do? Well, right now, all we have is Washington City and we have Georgetown. We at one point had Alexandria, Virginia, but everything that was in Virginia got retroceded back to Virginia. So now the landmass that was given that all of DC sits on is less than the 100-mile square that's required. It's actually smaller than that. People don't know that because Virginia retroceded.
Right.
But so then you've got these two cities, and then all these people move into this area, and there's not enough infrastructure. The plumbing is bad. Everything's bad. And they're like, man, we got to fix this. This is a mess. It's like Georgetown and Washington City just blew up, and now they're like one big mess. You think about, you've got two cities that grow together now. It happens all the time. So they went in after the war and said, let's restructure this and make it just one municipal corporation instead of two, because guess what? Washington City was a municipal corporation by itself, and Georgetown was a municipal corporation back when it still belonged to Maryland, before it was even given as part of the territory for DC. So then once it was given, they changed its charter from being tied up to Maryland. Now it's just tied up to Congress, who is basically the governor of the whole territory of DC. That's how they set it up way back in 1790. They set it up this way. And so now they said, let's just make it one. So the whole Act of 1871 is housekeeping. It is to streamline. It's to go over, okay, who can be, who can serve in government. You have to take this oath. If you do so, if you owe any money to anybody, you can't, there's so many different things inside that act. And it's just a beautiful, very boring, very vanilla act like any other one. And nothing was done that was underhanded. If you just read it, you see that. It's very black and white.
Brady, you actually shared something, and I put it up on the screen, but then you turned it off.
I just wanted to make sure I had the right thing. You want me to pull it back up?
If you want.
Yeah, I've got it right here. I think this is the full act. That's what I had bookmarked, so I'll just bring it right back to you.
Because I know people, they kind of want receipts on this, so
here it is.
There
it is. Okay, so let me explain a little bit at the top of this page. Keep in mind what I said earlier about chronological order. Whenever they met in, they're sitting in Congress today and they're talking about things. They did it just like this. They're going to see how on the top there's all this, and then there's like a kind of a break in there, and then there's more. Everything they did on that day, they just did in chronological order. They finished one thing and then, okay, next topic, and they just kept writing. So at the top of this act, you see stuff about money changing hands and so forth. That is not the Act of 1871. That's the previous thing that they were discussing. Then they closed the books on that, and you can see that right there at the bottom. It's or right there in the middle where it says.
Can you make it a little
approved? Yeah, it says approved February, whatever. And then there's that little line, and they're starting a new topic, and that's when they start. Okay, let's talk about the Act of 18. Let's put the Act of 1871 right here.
Right here, it says an act to, I'm sorry, I can't highlight with this PDF form. It says an act to provide a government for the District of Columbia. If that sounds familiar, that's exactly what Mel said about 3 minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead and read that whole paragraph, because there's something else in there, Brady, that's like so obvious.
Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled that all that part of the territory of the United States included within the limits of the District of Columbia be, and the same is hereby created into a government by the name of the District of Columbia. Well, let's stop right there. Because that's pretty clear that all of the part of the territory of the United States included within the limits, and limits is the key word, is now the District of Columbia, which means it has no authority over anything outside those limits. And what
even the word territory, Brady, I mean, the rest of it wasn't territory. The rest of it was states.
Well, I think a lot of what we're talking about here can be rendered moot with the knowledge that this whole act was repealed like 4 years later. So
but people even come up with stories about that. I mean, it's ridiculous. So we need to come back to, I really think we have to come back to this foundation and go, this is a vanilla, boring piece of paper that doesn't do anything, because they say, well, it did, but then they made a lot of things happen, even though they repealed it later. All this, they set the stuff into motion. No, we got to flatten this right here. But sorry, Brady, I interrupted you.
No, I handed off the baton so both of you guys could interrupt the heck out of me, because that's an important.
Okay, but keep reading past that. Yes, it's only for that area that's bordered in there, and then read past that.
And the same is hereby created into a government by the name of the District of Columbia, by which name it is hereby constituted a body corporate for municipal purposes.
For municipal purposes.
And may contract and be contracted with, sue and be sued, plead and be impleaded, have a seal and exercise all other powers of a municipal corporation, not inconsistent with the Constitution and laws of the United States and the provisions of this act.
Can you read that? Can you read that again? Not inconsistent with?
Not inconsistent with the Constitution and laws of the United States and the provisions of this act.
Exactly. It's all comes up under the Constitution. None of this people saying, this sidesteps the Constitution, it broke the Constitution, they went around the Constitution. The very first paragraph tells you this is constitutional and it abides by the law of the land.
Yeah, and Ron, you and I have done a lot of classes with our good friend Douglas V. Gibbs, Mr. Constitution.
Yep.
So I'm going to ask you a couple tough questions. How can the Constitution be changed?
Amendments.
Oh, is this an amendment?
No.
So Congress does not have the ability to change the Constitution?
No, not they can propose an amendment, but it still has to be sent to the states for ratification.
Oh, so basically, even after this act, the Constitution is still intact, and none of those rules have changed in any way, shape, or form.
Not to my knowledge.
I think your knowledge is probably spot on here, Mel. You agree?
But I will.
100%.
I will say, and I may be jumping the gun here a little bit, but the people who talk about this as being the foundation for our current government, corporate or whatnot, the fact that the existing government doesn't even follow the Constitution anymore, they basically just ignore it. And I think that is where a lot of people they're looking for a reason to attach that too. And I think this just, this whole thing of there being a separate secret Constitution maybe justifies it in their mind. I'm hypothecating here.
Let me address that. You said the current government ignores the Constitution, and I think that's slightly off. I think what they do is they try to twist it and reinterpret it.
Okay,
and that's what pretty much since the Warren Court in the 60s, they've been reinterpreting it. But I go back to the 1800s, but we don't have to go to fully into that one. But that's exactly right, Ron. The Constitution was not amended.
Right. Well, and also, guys, I think, we say that they don't follow the Constitution, but, there's some things that the Constitution doesn't address, which is like the marketing. I mean, I put this post out yesterday, and it's basically, look, if you have something on your ballot that says, hey, will you please, okay this penny tax because we want to improve the schools in your area, or this bond, and there's signs everywhere. It's like, vote yes for this. And my thought is, the second you fall for the marketing and say, yes, you can't complain about your taxes because you're giving permission to be taxed. And I don't think we really understand how much power we have over what's happening to us, but we allow ourselves to be emotionally marketed. And if we actually put some of this up against the Constitution, let's talk about 501c3, for example, as an example. There is a separation of church and state, which a lot of people think that means the church and the state can't be combined. No, what that meant was the state had to pound sand, and they were not allowed to infringe on the church, not the other way around, if you really look at it. Absolutely. And the church could do anything they wanted. So when we think, well, how does that mesh with what's going on today? Because if they talk in the pulpit about stuff, they can get their 501c3 pulled. Well, what they decided to do was, let's get them to give us permission so they said, hey, let's dangle this in front of you. We'll give you a tax break if you sign this 501c3. And that's how they work around the Constitution. You don't have to sign a 501c3 to be a ministry or a church.
Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptists is one of the most misinterpreted documents from the founding age I think we've ever seen. It was completely well, we don't have to dive into this too deeply, but yeah, 100% Mel. One of the interesting things is churches that are worried about the tax exempt status to such a wide degree that keeps them out of politics is the biggest lever that the state and the government does to keep churches and people that go to church from being politically active. And we saw the statistics leading up into the 2024 election about how many evangelicals are not even registered or don't vote, and that's got to stop. That's an important topic. It's not what we're talking about today, but it's a big deal. Thought it was worth following up on.
Yeah, and it's just go ahead. Sorry.
Let me share this on the screen real quick so you guys can see it. This is SD Gardner, and I know SD, and she says, I think the 1871 Act is a diversion to where the real causes of what legal jurisdictions we operate under. Any thoughts?
Well, is she suggesting that that could be a suggestion towards maritime law? And right. I'm not sure we want to go there this early in this conversation, but Mel, do you want to get that later on?
Well, yes. and let me say that that this individual worked as a contractor for the Department of Homeland Security for almost 20 years. So she was in DC for a significant amount of her career. So she's not dumb by any stretch of the imagination.
Nobody here is. I mean, that's the beautiful thing is nobody here is.
Yeah. Reiterating the point that Mel opened with, people that believe in this 1871 corporation theory, which we don't believe in, the three panelists here, we consider you guys friends. You recognize there's something wrong. There's something wrong with the way the federal government's being run. We're just suggesting that this is actually not quite the cause, and therefore the solutions might be a bit different. But we do not think that most of the people espousing this theory, and I say most because there's exceptions, there are grifters in our world. Right. But most of the people who believe that the U.S. is a corporation are absolute patriots. People I would absolutely go in a
foxhole, absolutely,
in a heartbeat. Yep. We were talking. This whole show is addressed to friends of ours, not enemies at all.
That's right. That's right. And we want to be considered your friends as well. We're not here to twist your minds. We want you to look at this stuff and investigate it yourself. But we're going to take you to the original documents and invite you to step away from the people who are putting up things like that whole video. What's it called? The world's greatest story, the greatest story ever told, and stuff like that, where it's all memes and there's no documentation and there's a lot of great cinematography and there's a really cool voice and and all that. And we're human beings. We're emotionally drawn to things. But unfortunately, a lot of these documents are boring. They're documents that were put up by attorneys and so forth. It's not that it's hard to read through. It's just, it gets boring.
Right.
And so people gravitate towards the sensational. And I think it's an invitation to step back from the emotion and to just look at things critically, objectively, and then to put everything in together and they go, okay, I'm not dumb for having believed these other things. I want to reassess. So.
Mel, by the way, she says exactly that was my point. So I just shared, if you can see the screen, I shared the certification of incorporation of United States Corporation Company.
Oh, I love this one.
Yeah, and if you guys see right here, let me make it really big so that it cannot. This is looks like it's is it June or July?
Looks like July.
Of 13th of 1925.
Yep. So if you go and look up this company, it's an actual private company. People think it's the United States, but This poor company, had they any idea that they were going to be part of a huge grift and a psyop, maybe change their name to something else. But who here has heard of a RA? Forget what the R stands for. Let's help me, guys. With a corporation, you have to have an agent. You have to have an agent.
Resident agent, yes.
Resident agent. You have to have a resident agent. So if you don't know what a resident agent is, because most of us don't have corporations, by law, you have to have what's called a resident agent, and they have a number of different duties, and one of you can probably articulate better, but they are kind of a go-between, because what is the whole idea of a corporation? A corporation is to put a shield between you as the person and lawsuits that you can't endure where your corporation is sued. So you have to have this RA, you have to have an agent in there, and to handle like it's a blanket between you and these lawsuits or whatever. So this company is a registered agent. That's what they do. They're a registered agency for a conglomerate of different businesses. It's a private company. So when someone sues, like I want to go sue Chrysler, the lawsuit doesn't go to Chrysler. The lawsuit goes to my resident agent, whoever that is. And you can go look at resident agents. You can go look that up on Google and go find one. If you're in the market for a resident agent, you can find many different companies that are registered agents. And that's what this company is. So whenever you see that the United States Corporation Company was sued, they are being sued on behalf of one of their clients.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
and resident agents typically, because I know I have a corporation based out of Wyoming. Well, I have to have an agent on. I pay like a monthly fee for a resident agent in Wyoming. If there's any legal documents that have to be sent, they come from the state. They don't come to where I am. They have to go to an address within the state, because I have to have an address in the state where they can send official documents to. And
Ron, when we did when Doug, Mel, and I did the video last month, I had a website up that showed that there's like 47 U.S. corporations as registered agents around. That link is now dead. So that has disappeared in the last 4 or 5 weeks. So
did you do that through Open Corporates or through the Florida Sun? Like, what did you pull that from? Because if you go to the Florida, what is that?
Yeah, I've got it in the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. U.S. Department of Transportation is where I got it from.
Okay, so I believe
I'm going to share this. I'm going to share this comment here, and I think this is. I kind of think this is apropos and a lot closer to what's really going on.
The Fed creation was the takeover of the nation.
Yeah, because essentially what it did is it reversed the flow of money from the states to the federal government, from the federal government out to the states.
Follow the money.
Thus concentrating power at the federal government level.
That's all Brady. That's going to be all Brady's wheelhouse.
Well, I've been saying this to Ron since the day we met. Follow the money, and it seems to work out pretty well throughout history.
Yeah, I think a large portion of what people think is the 1871 Constitution really was derived in the Progressive era with the 16th and 17th Amendments and the Federal Reserve Act. That's my contention.
Well, yeah, that ties into another topic we're going to be talking about a lot in the next upcoming weeks is the 14th Amendment, the entire post-Civil War era. There was a lot of acts done by Congress, et cetera, and there were a few amendments that changed the very nature of the Constitution, not by the way they were intended, but the way 20th century courts would interpret them later on. But that's not tonight's conversation quite yet.
Well, and I don't want to go down that road too much, but I just want to say I was listening to an Andrew Napolitano speech before we went live today, and he was talking about that when he was a judge, he had inquired to courts. Cornyn, he was a congressman at the time, and he said, well, why don't you guys follow the Constitution when you pass laws? And Cornyn's response was, well, we don't. We pass the laws, and if they get passed, then it's up to the guys on the robes to decide whether it's constitutional or not. And if it is, they'll if they approve it, great. If it isn't and they approve it, okay, well then we got something that we wanted. I mean, that was basically his answer. So,
which is complete and utter nonsense.
Yeah.
Well, because you can't leave that out there without me jumping in a little bit.
Listen, I'm just
the Constitution of the United States is a contract between sovereign states. They are the parties to the contract. Only they can change the Constitution, and therefore only they get to interpret it. In 1803, Marbury versus Madison, the Supreme Court decided they would be the interpreter. That power is nowhere mentioned in Article 3. It was debated on the floor in Philadelphia ad nauseum. It was soundly defeated. The fact that the court should decide what's constitutional. No, the states were always supposed to be the judge and jury over what is constitutional. And if they didn't like it, there were two options: nullification and secession.
Wow.
The Supreme Court was only supposed to decide arguments between between states.
Now, Article 3 clearly articulates that, Ron. It tells you when the federal courts are involved. And, well, everyone wants to know, so how long have they been how long has the original Constitution, the original intent been decaying? And what we always say is before the ink was even dry, because the Judiciary Act of 1789 allowed the federal courts to stick their little noses, big noses apparently, into state issues.
Yes.
Great example of that is if Mel and I are both living in North Carolina and we have a problem that is a North Carolina court issue, she doesn't get to take me to federal court, period. That's none of their damn business. That's it.
Yeah.
And the Judiciary Act of 1789, which was passed in the very first Congress of the United States, went completely against what was argued against in Philadelphia, what was put down in paper in the Constitution, and what was argued very heatedly in the Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers, the ratifying conventions of Virginia, North, and New York, which are very well documented, and in Madison's notes. There is no ambiguity to what the intent of this was. The Constitution would have never been ratified, period, if the states had thought that this new federal government they were going to create, which expanded upon the powers that the Articles of Confederation gave, that had already been agreed upon, if they'd ever thought it would give this new federal court, this new federal judiciary, the ability to stick their noses into state business.
Okay, I have a question, and I don't, obviously I'm not asking for your, I don't think you know the answer. Maybe this is rhetorical, but if that was the case, and the state governments were responsible for sending the senators to represent the state's interests at the federal government level, how did it get past the Senate?
John Adams.
Really?
That's my answer.
Okay. Can you elaborate on that?
Not tonight. I'd have to go dig into some old notes, but you can bring me back on for that conversation because it's a really important topic.
I agree. I agree because basically what you're talking about is judicial review.
That was the predecessor to judicial review. Okay. Remember, judicial review wasn't the first time that the Supreme Court thought that they had the ability to be the adjudicator of what's constitutional. It was the first time they actually overturned Congress. They'd actually tried to do that before. They'd actually assumed the power 7 years earlier.
Okay. Yeah. That's right. I just remember Marbury versus Madison. But anyway,
yeah, it's a John Adams problem that could have been stopped. Should have been.
All right. Well, do we have any other documents or any things that we want to talk about before
absolutely.
Okay, what do you want? Which one do you want to go to this time?
Let's see. So I want to talk about, there's rhetoric going around about how there's two constitutions. One, the original one was the Constitution for the United States, and the Act of 1871 changed it to the Constitution of the United States. And I want to just talk about, first of all, it was not titled originally the Constitution for the United States. They just called it the Constitution, and they were saying it's the one that's for the people of the United States. It wasn't a title. They never said this is the title, but it's that preamble that people go, oh, see, it's that title. Well, I still am trying to figure out who started that, because it's such a silly grift. I mean, it's such a silly psychological mind twist to say that's the title, because all it is, if you read the preamble, it's just saying the Constitution, the one that's for the United States.
Right. And
on
actually, can I piggyback on that? The originally it said we the states, and then it listed every single state, and then they said, oh no, okay, we're not going to do that. Then they went to the we the people, but that was understood at that time, because the people didn't approve the Constitution, the states approved the Constitution. So the preamble was we the states, and then they had all the states listed out, and then they changed it to shorten it up for brevity, I suppose.
Well, and also because they didn't know if they're going to list the states, they were going to be adding more states, and so they couldn't just confine it to that. There would be more states going on online, but that was not a title. And as a matter of fact, most of the time they just referred to it as the Constitution. However, let's go ahead and debunk the idea that the first time the Constitution of the United States was used in 1871. In fact, the first person to coin that phrase was George Washington himself in 1789, when he did the proclamation about having Thanksgiving. He calls it the Constitution of the United States. But then the first legal document where it's used that we can find, and someone can find one sooner than this, that's fine. But if you think about, Congress, all of this just started, 1787, it started being ratified in 1788, 89 by the different states. In 1792, they passed the Coinage Act. And I think you have that there, Ron, that document.
Yes, I do.
You would pull that piece up. It actually states in here, the very first time, it refers to the Constitution as the Constitution of the United States in this act right here, 1792. And I'm not going to know exactly what paragraph, but
okay, so the second Congress, section 1, there's chapter 14, 15, say lighthouse.
I can actually read it because I pulled it up on my phone.
For making act of mint and regulating the coins of the United States.
One. Yep, okay. That one right there.
So,
and it says, let me pull it up. I have it on my phone.
Section 1, be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, and is hereby enacted and declared that a mint for the purpose of a national coinage be, and the same is established to be situate and carried on at the seat of government of the United States for the time being, and that for the well conducting of the business of the said mint, there shall be the following officers and persons, namely a director, an assayer, a coin chief, a chief coiner, an engraver, a treasurer. Section 2, and it be further enacted that the director of the mint shall employ as many clerks, workmen, and servants as he shall from time to time find necessary, subject to the approbation of the President of the United States. And further enacted that this respective functions and duties of the officers above mentioned shall be as follows. Do you want me to continue?
I'm just trying to find where it specifically says it. It says, I thought we had that. I apologize. I thought we had
engraver, take the oath. Okay, there's little things here on the right hand side, on the left hand side, actually my right, that say what the assayer, engraver, treasurer to take the oath.
I will find it and get it to you so that you can show it to your people. But it has been used several times in acts from that time all the way up through. So that the phrase Constitution of the United States was not used for the first time in 1871. It was used in acts all through that time. But George Washington in 1789 was the very first one, and I'll read it to you because I have it here. Okay. Whereas it is the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God, to obey his will, to be grateful for his benefits, and humbly to implore his protection and favor. And whereas both houses of Congress have by their joint committee requested me to recommend to the people of the United States a day of public thanksgiving and prayer, to be observed by acknowledging with grateful hearts the many signal favors of Almighty God, especially by affording them an opportunity peaceably to establish a form of government for their safety and happiness. Now, therefore, I do recommend and assign Thursday, the 26th day of November, next, to be devoted by the people of these states to the service of that great and glorious being who is the beneficent, I love this, beneficent author of all the good that was, that is, or that will be, that we may then all unite in rendering unto him our sincere and humble thanks for his kind care and protection of the people of this country previous to their becoming a nation, for the signal and manifold mercies and the favorable interpositions of his providence, which we experienced in the course and conclusion of the late war, for the great decree of tranquility, union, and plenty, which we have since enjoyed, for the peaceful and rational manner in which we have been enabled to establish constitutions of government for our safety and happiness, and particularly, oh my goodness, it's just going to keep going.
Yeah, that was.
I'm sorry, it's in here. I thought it was right at the top, but it's not. But anyway, yeah, no. Which way are us? It keeps going. But he talks about, the Constitution of the United States. I apologize. I thought I had it. That is the very first time it was used was by George Washington. So I'm going to get you those because I thought I had them printed out. I apologize. But it has been used several times in Acts throughout history prior to 1781. And when I researched it, most of the time it's just referred to as the Constitution.
Well, what's interesting is let me segue to one of the other big things I know Mel talks about in her book and likes to debunk. Part of this theory of the 1871 corporation was that the United States went bankrupt following the Civil War.
Yes.
And the theory...
Was it the Civil War or the Revolutionary War or both?
It's a Civil War.
Okay, so it's Civil War on this one because it's 1871. My apologies.
I'll address the Revolutionary War in a second here, Ron, so I'm glad you brought that up. But ask that question again in a couple of minutes when I show you some of the real data over how broke the United States actually was. The theory says a couple of things, that the United States was bankrupt because of the Civil War, which ended in 1865.
Yeah.
And so obviously 6 years later, they had to, Congress had to unconstitutionally sell us to the banks of Europe and the Vatican Bank. Well, there's a couple of problems with that. The Vatican Bank didn't actually exist until 1942 or 3.
Right.
And
during World War II.
And the City of London is really interesting because it circles back to this idea of a corporation. The City of London is actually the longest standing municipal corporation in the world. It is just like DC, City of London. It is a municipal corporation that has its own little set of rules, and they have a bunch of little City of London, I don't know, they call them quasi-mayors or representatives that do things like negotiate trash tax and stuff like that for garbage pickup and stuff like that. They actually have no authority outside of that. It has become a banking mecca, and we can get into that later. That has to do with Nixon taking us off the gold standard, but that's a totally different conversation. The question at hand is, was the United States bankrupt after the Civil War? And I brought some hard data to talk about that. And I know when you guys talked for the brief time last week that Mel asked me to bring this data. So let me bring that up now, Ron, if that's okay.
Yeah, if you want to share it.
Yeah, I got a spreadsheet just for that purpose. What I did was I pulled the United States financial data from 1789. And you guys should be able to see that now.
Hold on. Got a top
right here.
Can you increase the font?
Yeah, I can get that up to, let's put it up to 200. Everybody can read that now?
Yeah. Can you go 300 one more time? Can you go 300 so that I can see it?
Oh, I forgot how blind you were. Let me see if I can do that. I've never had to deal with anyone quite as blind.
Oh, yeah. Trust me, I don't like it.
Oh, I know. I watch you reading. I'm going. It hurts sometimes when you miss a word. Because I know how smart you are, and that's.
I read very well. But man, it sucks when you can't see. you can't read as well.
You see these things on my head? I went and tried to get contacts, and I got to figure out whether I'm going to be able to make them work or not. I can't get the contacts in or out well enough, but I'm tired of wearing glasses myself. But
my issue, that's not my issue, but that's another day.
So let's walk through a fiscal history of the United States. In 1789, we are 71 million. This is the national debt.
Mhm.
Okay. This is how much we owe to people outside of the government. Most of $71 million. And it stays around 70 to 80 million most of the time up until no big fluctuation until we get to 1811, and the debt's really going down. And what happens in 1811 was the charter for the first Bank of the United States expires. And the United States says we do not, because the first Bank of the United States was never constitutionally allowed. And, here we are. And this is Madison is the president.
Yep.
And he's pretty darn constitutional at this point. He's, had 8 years of studying under Jefferson, et cetera. And he's pretty good on most things constitutional. And the Congress at the time and the Senate, I'm sorry, the Congress is the Senate and the House, they chose not to renew the 20-year charter for the first Bank of the United States that Hamilton had rammed down our throat for the sole purpose of saying we need to pay off our Revolutionary War debt and create credit so we can become a mercantilist government or system just like the Brits were. So we've just fought a very bloody Revolutionary War to a standstill to get away from the mercantilist system of England. And Hamilton wanted to reinstall the same thing and had much more success than we would have liked to have had. So in 1811, that bank expires. Now, Rothschild, and I think it was Nathan Rothschild, which is son of the founder, Mayor Amsar Rothschild, actually has a famous quote. And I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but he basically said, if the United States does not renew the first Bank of the United States' charter, I predict a very bloody war will show up on their shores. Fast forward about 6 months, and we got the War of 1812. The United States all of a sudden goes into quite a bit of debt for the war, tripled their debt over the next 5 years, and they in 1816 they chartered the second Bank of the United States to pay for the war debt because they have to borrow money from abroad or from anybody who'd be willing to lend it to them. And you need a central banking system to make that happen. So we get on all this debt for the War of 1812. And then we go through, the pre-Civil War period and the debt goes down. What's going on right now in terms of an economic standpoint is the North is starting to shift to industrialization. And they're trying to impose tariffs on the South. The tariff is a net exporter to Europe. And they wanted to have import taxes, which by definition become an export tax on the South.
Right.
The North was doing that to protect their young, burgeoning industrial base from the British competition. England was 50 years ahead of all of Europe and America in industrialization because they had a very developed banking system. They were able to create capital, pool capital, and they were able to industrialize much quicker. One of the reasons the British Empire was, became the empire where the sun never sets had to do with their banking system. It may not be moral, but it is effective for short periods of time. Any comments before I keep going?
No, yeah, you're fine. You're getting into the well, that was with the tariffs of abomination, and that was in my opinion that was one of the main reasons for the War of Northern Aggression. But I know what you're going into here. You're going into the Andrew Jackson paying it off.
Yeah, well, so here's Jackson. In his first year, he's elected in 1824. He starts serving in 1825, and the national debt starts going down. He never quite paid it off. But in 1835 and 36, they actually get rid of the second Bank of the United States. He did not quite pay it off. That's he tried to. Andrew Jackson there's a bunch of good and bad about Andrew Jackson.
Yep.
He created a lot more government than was constitutionally allowed. But when it comes to the bank, the national bank, and paying down the debt, I give the guy an A+.
Agreed.
Mel, any comments before I go on?
No, it's so profound to me because I've always just assumed, we were in debt. And just knowing this body of research is fascinating to me. I've never really delved into the financial side of things.
Okay.
Yeah, but if we're, when you get done with that and we go back into corporation stuff, yeah, but no, I mean, this is intense. I mean,
Well, I think this piggybacks on the corporation
it does.
issue because it really what it gets down to the foundation is that something's wrong. We're trying to show what the problem is.
Right, and they're making it about money, and we had to be bailed out, and all of this, and because of that, they made dirty deals, and we weren't.
Right.
We weren't.
Well, it touches on what is mercantilism all about, and we should touch on that. And they're really talking about they talk about internal improvements, protective tariffs, and internal improvements are the biggest parts of what they call mercantilism. You can also call that crony capitalism, and you can also call it fascism. It's where the people closest to the seat of government, corporations, get handouts or special favors from the government, and they create cartels where they basically are eliminating their competition unless you're one of the favored insiders. This is how we end up building the railroad system. This is in the founding days, they were trying to build canals, and this is what Hamilton wanted. It's also called patronage. When you have political patrons, you have a system where the government can hand out goodies to the favored people. It's also known as corruption. This is a system we live under today. This is not what the founding fathers wanted. This is what Hamilton wanted. This is the system we got. The British had been living under with the British East India Company for centuries. The Dutch had it before that with the Dutch East India Company, and it's a derivative of how the Venice, it's the original founders of this dual entry banking system. This whole idea of capitalization had conquered quite a bit of the ocean-faring world, even though they're a little small island city-state. This is the same system. It's very effective for.
Can I ask you a question? It's I think it's related, but if you can correct me. But because everybody talks about how our social security numbers are traded, the QSIP numbers and all this other stuff. And what I know that not to be accurate because the numbering system is different. So can you explain that a little bit?
Can we push that back about 10 or 15 minutes?
Yeah,
Because I know Mel knows this answer really well, and so do I. But push that back, cable that, and bring it back up if you don't mind.
Okay.
But we absolutely want to talk about the QSIP number because that's part of this theory.
Yeah.
Is your social security number? Is it QSIP? Yeah. We'll get to that. So let me just finish this bit, and then we can shift over to that. So here we are in the 1830s and 40s. And all of a sudden the debt starts going up a little bit, but not alarmingly so. We're not even, we're still $38 million. This is also known as the free banking period. And it was actually an amazing period of growth. And I don't want to go into all the details, but most of the states were creating some of their own currency. You had regional and local banks, and they were doing pretty well. They weren't failing very often. It was a good period of time for economic growth across America, despite the tariff abominations. But we had issues that we've already talked about. So the debt's still reasonable. And we get to 1860. Abraham Lincoln wins a really tough four-way election. We break out into a war between one slave-owning constitutional republic and another slave-owning constitutional republic, which Ron alluded to earlier as the War of Northern Aggression. And some people were taught that it's called the Civil War.
Correct. It's
Well,
it was not a war of slavery. It was a war of the South. Well, I always like to say this. At the fundamental level of a civil war is two entities fighting for control of one thing. All right? Well, the South was not fighting for control of Washington, D.C.
Right.
They were fighting for control of their own self-determination, just like the 13 colonies were they were fighting for their own self-determination away from Britain. There's very little difference there.
Well, the first one was a civil war. The second one was not. It was a war it was actually an imperial war. What we call the Civil War was not civil.
Correct.
The Revolutionary War was actually a civil war because we were British citizens at the time.
That's a good point. Actually, I hadn't thought about it that way, but that's actually an interesting point.
Words matter.
Yeah. Yes, they do.
Yeah.
So we get to the can I call it the Civil War? Just
yes,
to
for the sake of the discussion, yes, Civil War.
All right. So this is actually the Union's debt debt, and it just goes skyrocketing because one of the biggest things in the Civil War, and we're going to do a couple shows on this going forward. And I know Ron wants to be a part of this because you've done a lot of reading on this. But if you go and read the Constitution of the Confederacy, it's actually a better document than the U.S. Constitution because they had 80 years to learn what the mistakes were. They stuck with this idea of federalism and local government. Because of that, the South, and they were so adamant about their principles, it was harder for them to raise funds for the war. And the North, it was very easy. Well, to some degree.
It's interesting that you say that, and that is absolutely true. The South was the South was full of principled men. 1,000% agree with you.
Not 100% of the South.
100%. Not 100%, but much the principled ideology of the South was basically it was the Jeffersonian wing. The South really was more Jeffersonian, whereas the North was much more nationalistic, and they wanted central government and stuff like that. Whereas the South wanted to be, they wanted more of the states' rights and decentralized government.
Yeah, that's accurate, but incomplete, and they need to complete it. So what you have to remember is the 1860 election, there were four major factions in America. The Southern Democrats, who had held a lot of power because of the Senate, were corrupt as all hell. These were the Southern aristocrats. The Northern Democrats were probably the people the three of us would agree with more philosophically than anything else. They wanted the Union, but not at all costs. They wanted slavery to die a very slow but hopefully quicker death. You had the Whigs, who had just died out and become the Republican Party, and this is the party of industrialists. This is Lincoln's Republican Party would become a single party dictatorship for the next 40 years, and in their system, the robber barons created the greatest wealth disparity in history, and we can talk about that more if you want. And there's a fourth faction that was also for unification, but this is all problematic. And Lincoln only won with like barely 40% of the popular vote. He just won in the Electoral College.
Right.
That's where the North had the advantage. So Lincoln's trying to fight a war, and he needs money. And I just showed you how the debt went up. Well, he went over to Europe, and his bankers go to Europe and they say, okay, we need to borrow money for this war. Now, our friend Matt Eric talks about how the Europeans wanted to split up America, and he's partially correct on that. But the real reason Lincoln wasn't able to borrow money is because they were asking him to pay 35% or more in interest, and that's just not going to happen.
Right.
So they issue what's called a greenback system. It's the first time we went on a debt-based currency. That happened. I want to pull back up the screen and show you what happens to the debt after that. Ron, can you pull me back up? Okay. So now we're on the greenback as of 1863. And the national debt wars over $2.6 million. I'm sorry, that's $2.6 billion. Seems like a big number at the time, but it's not escalating. If you're paying 35% interest, your debt's going up much faster. You're trying to go through Reconstruction. You had a wartime economy. The South is destroyed. There's no way your debt doesn't go up if you're paying that kind of debt. So it did not happen. We didn't borrow money from anyone foreign. We issued debt-based securities called the greenback, which is very similar to today's FRN, Federal Reserve Note. It's backed by the full faith and credit of the government. We did not go into foreign debt, period. It did not happen. And you can see that it goes down over the next, from 1871, from 65 to 71, when the war ended, when we allegedly were so far in debt, we had to sell our entire country, our birth certificate, etc., to the Vatican and the London banks. It didn't happen. I mean, if the numbers there aren't crystal clear, I don't know what more evidence you could want.
Well, can you go up? Can you go up to like the Oh, like the progressive era. I want to see kind of what happened to the debt up into as we get into the 1900s.
Yeah, look how it stays so. It starts going down.
Yeah, and
Which
there's
is
no way it could go down if there was interest accruing.
Mm-hmm. So now we get to the 1900s. Now we're fighting wars of aggression: Spanish-American War, U.S. war against Hawaii, Cuba, etc. We get to your progressive era. Teddy Roosevelt starts going up.
I have a couple of questions in the chat that I know we still have some stuff to go over here, but I want to involve the audience a little bit here. If you guys would humor me here, let's see. The first question is, just got home, was listening in the car. First question: if we won the Revolutionary War, why are our courts under the BAR? Shouldn't it be the AAR?
Yeah, if I can take this one. So the BAR, they're talking about the British Accreditation Registry. If you go look this up, there is no such entity. There is a British Accreditation Registrar. It's one or the other. But this is it's an auditing company. It's a company that works on best practices on several different schema. As a matter of fact, if you pull it up, British Accreditation Registrar. And if you're able to show that, they are in Britain. They deal with best practices in different schema, like food, like I don't know, several different schema, and having nothing to do with law or courts or America or anything to do with our attorneys and so forth. It's not there. So you think, okay, well, if British Accreditation Registry, the BAR, is an entity, well, then they would have a presence. But here it is. This is the BAR, and they certify different, environmental quality of, life. It has to do with basically certifying different companies in Britain for best practices for whatever certifications they need. Doesn't have any, and you won't find a schema in here having to do anything with law or the courts. But the problem with the bar,
action, management, personnel, marketing, and testing calibration.
It's all in Britain. It's not even in America. It has nothing to do with America. But the other part of this is the bar was actually talking about it's not an acronym. It's not 3 capital letters. It's a capital B, little a, little r. It's a word, and it's referring to the bar in the actual courtroom. So whenever you go to law school and then you've got to go pass the bar, what that means is it's an exam that allows you to no longer just have to hang out in the, I can't as a civilian, just a person, I'm not allowed to go through that little gate unless I'm summoned by the judge, or if I have an attorney and I go in there with my attorney, I'm allowed to go through that gate and sit at the table if I'm a defendant or if I'm the, whatever, if I'm in a lawsuit of some sort. I can't just do that. Attorneys can, because they passed the test that allows them to pass the bar that separates the general public from the court proceedings. That's what the bar is referring
to. And Mel is 100% correct on what she just said. That matches our research. Ron knows this because our good friend Doug Gibbs looked into this 3 or 4 years ago, because we get this question all the time. Mm-hmm. Why they called it a bar might even go a little bit deeper than that, because it was short for barrister. And the barristers were the original lawyers in England.
Interesting.
And that's why they called it the bar. But
that's why they called the bar that's in the courtroom a bar, because of the barristers.
It was an abbreviation for barrister. But it's a great question. We get it all the time. And Mel, we haven't talked about this, so I'm glad you nailed that one as well.
Yeah, and that's in the book as well. And then, go ahead.
I haven't finished the book either. So Ron and I are both guilty of not completing all of the book.
Well, no, I finished the book. I just, there was,
the question,
there was just more questions. So, but I want to make sure that we get the audience involvement here, because it's really going to be good for us, I believe. Second question: if our hosts and now ourselves know that the government operating outside the Constitution, then, and they have to know it themselves, how do we get back to the Constitution?
I guess my question is, are Are we operating outside of the Constitution? I think that they find loopholes for things, but I don't think that the government is fully working outside of the Constitution. The Constitution worked just fine for me, and a lot of people don't know this, but I was sued by Mark Elia, well, by two different incorporations in Arizona during the 2022 season. I stood up almost 10,000 people across America to watch drop boxes, and ended up in a lawsuit that they hired Mark Elias as their attorney of record, who came after me with the Klan Act and with civil rights violations. They were trying to make it federal to shutter everyone's First Amendment rights to stand guard at drop boxes and just watch over lawfully from a lawful distance, not voter intimidating, not any of that. And they wanted to shut that down. So they tried to go after me federally. And you know what? The courts worked just fine for me. Like the judge was like, no laws were broken here. So I don't think we can just carte blanche stamp that everybody is breaking the whole government. Like we throw the government out there like it's one great big giant entity. There's a lot of good people that work in the government, and there's bad people that work in the government, and there's people who work the system, and there's people to abide by the Constitution. And I think it's really about personalities and certain people and cabals and groups that work at what they do. I mean, I don't agree with any of the three-letter agencies existing and so forth.
Let me address that real quick, if I may. Sure. When people say the government, what they really don't understand is the government, like you said, it's a conglomeration of a lot of people. But where we start talking about the government is in terms of like, call it conspiratorial stuff. It's not the government. It's basically criminals at the head of the government who have the authority and are above the compartmentalization of information, and they have the authority to give orders that will be followed by people who may not realize they're doing ill will or malevolent deeds at the hands of the people who truly the puppet string holders, if you will. And that's I think the question is, how do we get rid of them and go back to a system? Because there are a lot of things. Let's just take the Second Amendment. Okay, well, the Second Amendment says Congress shall make no law, abridging owner of firearms. Right? That's not exactly what it says, but the 1934 National Firearms Act is unconstitutional because the federal Constitution is a restriction on federal powers. It doesn't tell the government what they can do. It tells the government what they can't do. It is a restrictive document on the federal government.
Yeah, you've either got an enumerated power, which is what the government can do, and anything that is not enumerated to the federal government. And I hate using the word federal government because federalism is the antithesis of a national government. So let's call it the national government, not the federal government. That is a misnomer, and it's starting to irritate me.
Well, I don't want to irritate you, or answer.
I might have to go on it. So agreed with both of my co-hosts tonight. Answering the question, how do you get back to the Constitution? So the Constitution is not broken, but it's bent. It's been twisted and warped in many ways over at least 164 years. I date that back to Lincoln, but it goes back further. I already talked about 1789, the Judiciary Act. It's been warped since the ink was not even dry on the parchment. There are 7 articles in the Constitution, and one of them is Article 5, and that tells you how the states themselves can meet, have a discussion, and ratify changes to the federal government to make sure it stays in line. We talk about this. We've used 6 of the 7 articles on a daily basis. Well, the 7th was how to ratify. And it told us it was a contract between states, not between the people, but between the states. We, the people, don't own the government. We, the states, do. That's an important distinction. So if you want to fix the Constitution, you got to start thinking in terms of federalism, and it's we, the states. So you act locally. But we need Article 5 convention in the worst way. And there's a reason we've never had one. Because the people in Washington, D.C. that we've sent there to represent us, seems that they represent, I don't know, multinational corporations or other special interests instead. And the last thing they want is for us to send non-politicians to meet in convention and make decisions that might take away their power. So if you want to get us back to true constitutional original intent, it's an Article 5 convention.
And I agree with that. But I've also I heard the argument against it, and I understand that, but you kind of shot that down too. So I'll leave that for another day. But here's a real special. It has a last question: Can Marbury versus Madison be used to get rid of all three-letter agencies, as they have not been formed via amendments by Congress? Example: Federal Reserve Act isn't an amendment.
Marbury versus Madison is not the path for that. You know what? I think the path to that, to get rid of three-letter agencies, is the exact same way they're created. And I would say DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, might just start taking a look at that. You have to make it part of the national conversation again.
Well, a lot of that stuff was, or a lot of those agencies have been neutered as a result of Chevron deference.
Yeah, that was a big deal, and we covered. Doug and I covered that on my Refederalist Report show quite a bit. When those cases came down, we were tracking those closely.
Yeah,
basically, what Ron's talking about is these unauthorized federal agencies, three-letter agencies, have decided they were become the judge. Sorry, they decided to create law, enforce law, and then adjudicate law. They've usurped all three branches of government as the fourth branch, the administrative state. That's no longer in play. And the fact that, last week's election turned out the way I hoped for, and we have a lot of people coming into the government that absolutely agree with that line of thinking, you're going to see a lot of federal agencies curtailed and maybe even eliminated and moved back to the states where they friggin' belong.
Yay. So awesome.
So here's one quick question. Why is it called the bar exam? And I think I'm just going to take a stab, and this is because bar is short for barrister, and if it's a barrister exam, then that's what you're. That was the. Am I? That would be a logical conclusion on my part?
I'd go with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Somebody sent me a link and it says explain this. I went to the link and it just so it says United. Let me share it here. Sorry. When I go back and forth. So this says let me see if I can make
yeah. Yep. Got this one.
Okay. United States, 15. United States means a federal corporation, an agency, department, commission, board, or other entity of the United States, or C, an instrumentality of the United States.
Yep. So this is something that kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier, that used to law was all chronological. And I think it was like 1926 or 28 or 29, right in there. They said, this is hard. This is a mess. We need a different system. And they took everything to statutes and code. And basically what that was they reorganized how they organized the law. Instead of it just being chronological order, they gave it basically a fancy Dewey Decimal System. So now we have code. And so they also, though, wanted to make sure that I'll give you a couple of examples, but they wanted to make sure that it was understandable by everyone. When you read a certain section of code, that they would have a set of definitions for the way words were used in that section. If it was possibly could mean something else in a different section, like if one word has the same definition all the time, they didn't need to do that. But at times when it was used differently for different purposes, they put a definition section in each section of our statutes, of our codes. So this particular 28, so chapter 28 is about taxation. It's about receiving taxation. I believe it's a taxation clause. Correct me or act, not act. Title 28. Title 28 is about collecting debts. All of Title 28, that's what it's dedicated to. Okay. So they put in definitions where you would go in on different lines. It says United States. And well, on this line, it's talking about it's talking about how the side of where there's a corporation set up, again, not a for-profit. The United States is not turned into a corporation. It is talking about how do we funnel the money, like how do we have the accountability and the transparency to show we've received debts paid or we've collected debts that are owed to the United States. That's what Title 28 is about. If you go and read in a different title, United States, it'll have different definitions. So they put the definitions clearly for each different title so that you understand.
Here, let me read the definition of corporation as of the 1828 Webster's Dictionary. Corporation, noun, a body politic or corporate formed and authorized by law to act as a single person, a society having the capacity of transacting business as an individual. Corporations are aggregate or sole. Corporation aggregate consists of two or more persons united in a society which is preserved by a succession of members, either forever or till the corporation is dissolved by the power that formed it, by the death of all its members, by surrender of its charter or franchises, or by forfeiture. Such corporations are the mayor and aldermen of cities, the head and fellow of a college, the dean and chapter of a cathedral church, the stockholders of a bank or insurance company, etc. A corporation's soul consists of one person only and his successors as a king or a bishop.
Let me pile onto that.
Okay.
The word incorporation is different than corporation. To incorporate something means to adapt it into your fold, etc. Alexander Hamilton argued on the floor in Philadelphia to incorporate all of the states into the national government. He was resoundingly rejected on that. But the actual first, what we consider a corporation today, the way we know it in modern day, so like Microsoft or AT&T or any other corporation, the first one of those didn't exist until the 20th century. That was U.S. Steel. And that was created by J.P. Morgan and, of course, my favorite law firm. Ron, you know who they are?
Oh, Sullivan and Cromwell.
Absolutely. And it was basically a way to shelter the owners from liability for what their businesses did when the trusts were being broken up, allegedly, air quotes, because Teddy Roosevelt did not bust any actual trusts. They were just restructured. And that's the same period of time that the wealthiest robber barons in the world created this concept called the tax-free foundation. Just 2 years before, they sent their emissaries to Jekyll Island, created the Federal Reserve, and 2 years later we got the income tax for the rest of us, but not for their tax-free foundations. But that's going off on a different tangent.
Says statues are the color of law.
Oh, it's a comment below that. I was hoping you were going to ask about that. Bankruptcy was filed by Trump in 2018 and finalized in 2021. Okay, where is that documented?
I have it right here.
Yeah, we've all read this.
Okay, yeah, this one. All right, this one's fun. Okay, so this one, if you actually, United States Bankruptcy Court, Northern District of Florida, Tallahassee Division, and there's also that darker piece of paper that I had you pull. But if you guys read this, most of the time what you see is just this top part of this, and that's all you see, and you go, oh my goodness, United States, and I think there's even a different one, but it talks about the defendant is the United States Corporation Company, which we already dealt with earlier, is actually a registered agent. But if you go down through this, you actually look at the document. You guys, can you scroll back up to the top? I want to invite everyone to go and Google this or whatever. That's not the same case. That's a different case. I think it's 20.
I punched in the case code that was from your book.
There's another one in there. It's I think it's 21. Let me find it.
Give me the case number. Yeah, you know what? That's right, because it was 20.
Yeah, 20 and like 23775-KKS or something like that. It's in the book. Here, I've got the book right here. What am I thinking? Yeah. And so when you get past that, all everybody has ever shown is this top part, which that's not the same one, but that's all everybody is ever shown. And I'm like, hey, why don't I just go Google this? Let me find it for you. It's right here in the book.
And I have your book right here too.
Here it is. It is case number 20-40. Yeah, 20-40375-KKS. Invite everybody with a screen right now to go pull that up on the internet.
I'm going to look it up right now.
And it says United States Corporation Company alleged debtor. Okay, that's what it says. Case number 20-40375-KKS.
So here it is right here.
Here it is.
If I can blow it up a little bit. So it's a little easier on the eyes. Okay.
And somebody went and found the one, there's a bunch. Whenever you have a court case, there's there's all kinds of documents that go through the court. And this particular one that keeps getting shown to everyone it says United States Corporation Company, which again is a registered agency. It says alleged debtor, and it says order to show cause why Chapter 11 involuntary petition should not be dismissed, why petitioning parties should not have to post a bond, and whether petitioning parties should be sanctioned pursuant to bankruptcy rule. So this is all about a bankruptcy. Well, if you scroll down and actually go through the document, super fun. It actually, you're not on the document. You're
it is. This is interesting because it's got United States Corporation Company address is 1201 Hayes Street in Tallahassee, Florida.
Mm-hmm. And that is the address of the registered agent.
Yeah, DBA Corporation Service Company, DBA CIS or Coastal Internation Security Inc.
Okay, so I have it right here in my book. Let me read this to you. So, and you can see you can't see on this book. If you have my book, you can read this. But it says this matter came before the court.
What page is it?
Page 69.
Copy, okay.
This matter came before the court for hearing on December 17th, 2020, on the order for petitioning party Satiria Hebzibah to show cause why she should not be declared a vexatious litigant. Order to show cause, Doc 38. Petitioning party Satiria Hezbollah, aka highly favored Shekinah L, appeared. Having considered the record and testimony at the hearing, the court finds that Hezbollah failed to show any cause why this court should not declare her a vexatious litigant. She has, and they say her name, and I'm not going to keep saying it, I'll just say she has commenced 2 bankruptcy cases and 3 adversary proceedings in this court, including the instant case. She has also filed numerous cases in state and other federal courts. She has sued or attempted to sue federal, state, and local agencies, their employees, attorneys, judges, and other private persons and entities. This court and others have determined that cases and claims filed by her, other than the Chapter 7 bankruptcy petition filed in this court in 2018, which again had nothing to do with the United States. There was one bankruptcy thing that she filed against this by somebody. That's the only one they're saying, okay, that one's okay. But it wasn't against the United States. I think that's the problem, is people are going, United States Corporation Company is somehow equal with our United States, and it's not. It's like a private company.
Right.
But anyway,
we showed the founding document that it was formed in 1925.
Yeah, it's actually you can go and look at who the there's bylaws, there's all of that, in that corporation. In an effort to curtail her pattern of abuse, in 2017, the District Court of the Middle District of Florida entered an injunction against her, enjoining her from filing suit in this court. So this whole entire lawsuit is them saying she's a vexatious litigant. She keeps suing everybody. And she actually spent time in prison for this. Like, she went to jail over doing this stuff. And also, there's a whole chapter in the book that talks about the Moorish people. And, she's a Moorish individual. And it also ties her to Islam. And it also ties her to human trafficking. So, if people would just click, and go research the documents, we see these clips, like, okay, just go Google, go look that up. You find out, in fact, it has nothing to do with the United States being bankrupt. Now, there's another one that I sent you a picture of today, Ron, that was a more of a kind of a beige color sheet of paper. Did you happen to? I think you grabbed
Yeah,
that one.
got it. But you know what? The quality of the
That's
images.
okay.
Really
I'll
poor.
read it to you. So if you guys, it says the White House, Washington at the top, and a lot of people are going to know what I'm talking about. You can find it pretty much all over the place. Jan Halper Hayes put it up as documentation. The United States is a corporation. A lot of people have put this up, and it's on page 77. Of course, it's not in color; it's in black and white. But it says U.S. U.S. federal person Roger Allen Moore / Raj Maximore Raphael, another Moorish person, taxpayer identification, decedent's social security number. Okay, so I actually had Anons go and research and find this paper. Now, it's signed supposedly by Donald J. Trump, and the signature at the bottom says, "Sincerely, Donald J. Trump, uh, President, Chief Executive Officer of the United States." Well, if you read the body of this document, there are several different fonts. There's actually some in bold, some not. There are erroneous words. There are obvious things that are cut and pasted in here. There are typos all over it. And so we went everywhere. We went and looked for this in the Library of Congress. We went and looked for this in any White House documents, because anything that comes across that Donald J. Trump or any president signs is going to be archived.
Right.
So we looked for it through the entire White House, all the White House papers, nothing there. It was filed. This piece of paper was filed in a lawsuit. However, somebody made it up. You can file anything you want in a court of law. Like I can go and say, this is, I'm filing this as whatever evidence, and they'll put it in evidence for you, but that doesn't mean that it's factual or real or good. But if you look at it, if you guys will investigate this, you'll see even different fonts and so forth. Commas in weird places, dashes, things underlined, just odd stuff. So then if you go read the chapter in my book about the Moorish people, you learn more about these people and why they do this stuff. But they often go to jail or get fined for this same behavior of becoming vexatious litigants. They harass the courts. And so she was harassing the United States Corporation Company, which is, again, a registered agent, private company, as well as she was harassing a lot of people in the courts themselves.
So I think we've debunked that.
Well, okay. So, I mean, so Wild, I don't know if it's Wild Bill, but I mean, he is, Wild Bill, look, if you're not going to be, we're trying to have a civil conversation here, and you are coming in as an authority. So, I'm going to respectfully ask that you tone it down a little.
Hey, Ron, let me address that.
Yeah.
If you don't mind. Because Wild Bill just did say something, put something in there that's actually very much accurate and we agree on.
Okay.
It says, nope, the Constitution is a contract. When the South left the Republic, they created, well, you spelled it wrong. They created a new contract based upon the Articles of Confederation. That's 100% correct.
It is.
It was a voluntary union that was formed in the Constitution formed a voluntary union. And when the southern states decided it was not working for them anymore, they absolutely left and formed a legal voluntary union of their own. That's 100% correct.
And it was because the style of government that they formed was a confederacy. That is where they get the term Confederate States of America.
Well, let me take that back further, because there's a comment above that from the Real Special Ed. Do you want to pull that one up? Confederate means against the federal government, I think. All right, so words matter. We are not a constitutional republic. We are not a national republic. We are a federal republic. And what that means is when it was formed, there were 13 sovereign nations that formed a confederation. That is the United States. That is how we were formed. The difference is France formed a national republic. There was one nation of France. We had 13 sovereign nations. That is a confederation.
That was the Articles of Confederation.
That's when they seceded from the original Union. They thought that the United States of America was trying to form a national government. not a federal government. This is why I nitpicked earlier that we keep calling it the federal government. It is not federal. It's not acting like a federal government. It's acting like a national government. Ron, can you pull up the 1828 dictionary again and type in the word confederation so we can have that properly defined?
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are really, really good questions. And so Wild Bill, who's been a little bit, antagonistic in the chat, actually said something that's 100% correct. It's what we said earlier. People that disagree with us on this stuff have the same feelings and love of freedom and opposition to tyranny as we do. We disagree with the interpretation of history. We're going through source documents trying to explain why there's been some misinterpretations. And the reason we're doing it is because we think the solutions are a little bit different than people that believe in this, 1871 corporation theory believe. And we'd like to have you guys back, on our side 100% as opposed to 95%.
But yeah, but I said it before, said it again. I believe what they're doing is it's maybe this is a cheap way to say it, but it's like just blaming it on the 1871 corporation is it's like a cheap way to not really have to go look into it. It's just I could just say, oh well, this is 1871 corporation. We just need to get rid of that. And
yeah,
then
Ron,
everything will go back to the way it was supposed to be.
But we cite source documents.
I know that. I'm just saying that people.
Well, no, but that's what Dale said. That's what we said in the chat. Wild Bill said that. He said they have source documents. I don't think Wild Bill saw the beginning when Mel was going through all the source documents, and we did the same. But that's okay. They cite source documents doesn't mean they interpret them properly.
Right.
And
very well said. But here, okay, I brought up confederation. The act of confederating a league, a compact for mutual support, alliance, particularly of princes, nations, or states. The three princes enter into a strict league and confederation. The United States of America are sometimes called the Confederation.
So the United States of America, when our union was founded, was an experiment in self-governance, and we had 13 sovereign states that decided we would join into a confederation and that signed this contract known as the Constitution of the United States. When it didn't work for the southern states, they decided this contract no longer works. We're going to rip it up. We're parties to the contract. We can exit this. Now, was secession legal or not? Let's address that right now. Yeah, of course it was. You had the Conference of Hartford, and 14, where the northern states tried to secede from the Union because they didn't want to be part of the War of 1812 because they relied on trade with the British. No one thought that was unconstitutional. No one accused them of treason, and no one said that the other states should invade them. But I'll give you the best argument for why secession was legal. Between the time period where Lincoln won the presidency in 1860 and it was inaugurated in May of 1861, and shortly thereafter the quote-unquote Civil War started, Congress tried to pass 3 bills making secession illegal. None of them passed. But why would you pass a bill trying to make secession illegal if it wasn't legal already? Nobody has an answer for that because there is no answer. Secession was legal. It was always a voluntary union. When the South left, they had every right to do so.
I agree. I agree, and the thing that the primary reason they were pissed is because of all the tariffs they were paying.
Exactly right. It was an economic war more than anything else. There's a lot more. It wasn't just an economic war.
100%. I'm not naive enough to think that slavery didn't have didn't play a role, but it's not nearly the role that the modern day history books try to persuade us it was. So, guys, I want to have if you guys want to call in, let me know in the live chat, and I'll put the number up so you guys can call in. I wanted to take phone calls, so, but if nobody wants to call, then I don't know. I'm not going to open it up, but if somebody wants to call, yeah, I want them to, because it's specifically you, Dixie. I want you. All right. Well, Bill, I'm gonna be honest. I'm a little apprehensive to let you because I feel like you're going to be adversarial. But I'll let you call in. But if you're adversarial, I'm going to cut you off.
Let him call in, Ron. I'm sure he's a great guy.
All right. Here we go. I'm going to put the let me put the banners up here.
Mel, we hit all the points you wanted to make?
No, there's so many more, but we can that's so many more.
This might
The QSIP numbers, the birth certificates, there's your name is being traded on a trading floor.
Yeah, we can have a lot of fun with that. Ron, can we call this round 1 and maybe schedule round 2?
Yeah, if you want to, absolutely. I mean, obviously there's enough material here. Phone lines are open, guys. I'm waiting on anybody to call in.
So in the meantime, if nobody's calling in, let me go there a little bit. But as soon as somebody calls in, break in on me. How's that?
Copy that.
Sound good? Okay, guys, go ahead and call even though I'm talking. All right. So this whole idea of your birth certificate has a QSIP number on the back of it, and that your birth certificates are created on bond paper. Therefore, they're a bond, and they're trading your parents signed you over to. There's music.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hi. Is this who's this? Oh, okay. That's like. I think we hold on. Hold on. I think the connection is just absolute garbage. I'm going to call you right back.
Okay.
Sounded like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah. Well, I think the so what's going on is my Bluetooth is acting wonky. So give me a second.
Mel, jump back into your train of thought if you don't mind.
Yeah. So all this. So the QSIP, if you know what a QSIP is, it's like a company that wants to trade bonds or have some sort of a tradable what do you call it, securities of some sort. So my company wants to have tradable securities, and so I have to go and apply for what's called a QSIP number. And the phone is ringing.
Hey, Ron.
Okay. So that's so much better. All right.
Is it?
Oh yes, absolutely. I can hear you. It's much more clear.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay. So this is Wild Bill. So what is your question?
Okay. So here's what I've done research too, but I'm not somebody who's actually sitting in a library doing the source material, right? So I've listened to other people, lots of other people, and one of them, the guys went by the Informer, and he did his research way back in the day. So, for example, and he was actually questioning the state he lived in, as well as he said he got out of paying taxes by writing this very long letter to the Vatican, and it was a very specific place in the Vatican, office in the Vatican. Sent it to them. This is a story, not mine. Comes back from the Attorney General of England, is calling him up and asking him questions. And he said, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir." Next thing you know, he gets a letter from the IRS, and they said, "Don't use your Social Security number anymore. You no longer pay."
You're talking about what's his name? He's got 3 names to his word. Three names that he goes by. I can't think of his name right now.
Right. But a long time ago, right, he went by the Informer. I don't think he wanted to put his name out on the podcast. This is way back in 2007. So this is a long, long time ago, okay? What he stated was that what they did was they tricked the American people. What they did was that they re-ratified, like they would go back and re-ratify the constitutions, I think the states maybe, but they would change it from state of, say, your state. His state was North Carolina. State of North Carolina, well, it was really the estate of North Carolina. And like you said, words matter. Estate is a corporation.
There's no documentation for this, though.
But yeah.
Well, wait a minute. He's the one who did the source material, not me. So you're arguing with the wrong person.
Okay.
Right?
Well,
but
do you know where that source material can be found?
Nope. Yeah, library. What he did was he was a paid researcher. So he got paid to research for Fortune 500 companies. He was also one of these guys who were against taxes, right? He would go with other people to court to taxes. He told one story where they gave him so much time to look at the the code, right, and then try to come up with their argument. He says, well, you'll never be able to do that, okay? He also said there were many people who were doing this, trying to fight taxes. They'd go to court and they'd say, that's against the Constitution. And the judge, the federal judge, would tell them, sorry, sir, but that contract does not apply to you. Okay? That's why contracts matter. The only true contract that matters to anybody is your own state constitution, not the federal one, because you're not a signer of that contract. So, basically. The other thing, too, is that if it's not a corporation, then why are they issuing birth certificates? Because this is all based upon mercantile law. It's not based upon real law. You'd have to go back in time to, here's an example. So if we won the American Revolutionary War, he stated that he was very good friends with a professor from Clemson University, law professor. He asked him, he says, hey, what would you like if I go over to England to the library? He says, I want a certified copy of the treaty signed by Benjamin Franklin. Now that treaty is sitting in a law library, the original, not a copy, in a law library in England. Okay? It's real simple to understand this. That's true, right? Well, it'd be like the Chicago Bears playing the Green Bay Packers. The Bears lose, but they keep the trophy. That doesn't happen in wars. In wars, all wars that are declared have to end with a treaty. It's all contract. This is very ancient laws that go way back.
Ron, Bill, hold that thought, because you're laying out a bunch of things and several of them need to be addressed. So hold the thought. Don't go away. Mel, do you want to go first, or do you want me to? Let me do a quick one.
Do quick, yeah, go ahead.
First of all, there's no such thing as mercantile law. What they're referring to is maritime law that only extends to the waterways outside of a country's territorial waters, period. That's one of the interesting rabbit holes that people that accede to this thought of 1871 corporation go down. That's an entire show into itself, but it's not mercantile law. It is maritime law. That's where they're going with that. What you have, the difference between the British law, it's called common law versus commercial law. And Ron was kind enough to send out a cool video that reminded us of that earlier today. Yes. We could get into that a little bit. That dates back to 1938.
Wait. I hate to interrupt, but you're going to 1938, right? You've got to go way back to the beginning of the country and what law was. Say, we had common law. American common law is based upon British common law, right? We don't have common law anymore. We don't have common law anymore. We have statutory law.
We have both.
Right? And in fact, if it was common law, it would be very harsh. So what he described was that common law way back when was extremely harsh. So if you were in dispute of a contract or whatever like that, right? It's not like today, right? What they've done is that if you take law, the only true law is if you injure somebody. So if you and I have a contract and I don't fulfill my end of the contract, and there are they said anywhere from 7 to 10 things that a contract to be valid has to apply. So one of those things is that you have to know about the contract. You have to consent to the contract. You have to know what's in it to consent to it. So informed consent.
We really need to
hold that thought. Mel, go ahead and address a couple things, because I don't want to get too far down his.
We've got to just maybe stick to a question or two. But let's go with a lot of this is first of all, the whole maritime law thing, like what he was talking about. No, I'm not going to go into the maritime law thing.
The common, okay, let's address the common and the statute law.
Okay, so common and okay. So we started off with common law, but if you understand that common law is based on judicial decisions, it's the judge decided, and so now it's created precedents. Common law looks back to what was precedent made. So we said that's not robust enough, and it doesn't, then it's almost like you're legislating from the bench, because if the bench has decided something, but it's based on maybe one judge's decision, and then common law is basically going back to precedents, that's not really fair. That's not good law making. And so we went to statutory law now, which is actually more specific, and there's actual this, you do this, you pay this, this is the crime, here's the punishment. So there's a reason that we actually adopted statutory law. But our lawyers and our attorneys still also do have precedential law, which is common law. So we actually operate with both, and they try to balance the two. But statutory law is not evil, and common law is not the best thing in the world either. But somebody else take it from there. That's what I know about those. But yeah, war hamster.
Statutory law is not, it is evil. So it's evil because what you really do have are statutes that they can make up. They can make up any statute and then apply it to you. So for example, it's like this. If they decide for one moment that you guys, which you could be labeled enemy combatants, which you could be, and they decide.
But let me pause you for a second. Let me pause you for a second, because I want to ask a question to get some clarification. When you say they, who is they?
Right.
The government.
Okay, which government?
Which entity?
Your government.
No.
Which entity?
Federal, which, like federal, state, local, what?
It'll be federal.
Okay,
right
so right now
in the federal government.
So federal law right now, the federal government has been a lot of the federal government, the agencies have been neutered with the Chevron deference case.
As well as, which branch are you talking about? Are you talking about the judicial, the executive, the legislative? There's separation of powers.
Well, if you guys know your history, then you would know that Franklin Delano Roosevelt actually declared U.S. citizens enemy combatants.
I hadn't heard that, but
Ron, let's move on to the next caller, because I've only got about 10 more minutes, and let's see if anybody else. Wild Bill.
I don't know.
Let's come back on and ask these questions again, but we're not going to litigate this your whole theory tonight. But thanks for calling in.
I'm going to go.
Yeah,
I appreciate the call. I appreciate the call.
No, yeah, seriously. Yeah. Okay. Have a good night.
Later.
All right. So, let me see here. If there's anybody else who wants to call in, there's one line is open.
Okay, so you go back to the QSIP thing real quick and try to finish that up, because it's going to get into some of the stuff that he said too. So the whole idea of, so first of all, if you are someone who your company wants to give out securities, you go to, it's called QSIP something online, and I've got it written down, but you have to go to this entity to actually apply for a QSIP number. It is a 9-digit number. The first 6 digits are alphanumeric. Your social security number is not alphanumeric. The number on the back of your birth certificate is different. I will tell you about it in a second, but the first 6 numbers are alphanumeric. So it could be letters and numbers, letters and numbers. The next 2 numbers, let's see, 6, 7, 8. The next 2 numbers are, let's say your company has offered a security. Well, you want to offer another security. So the first 6 are your company's number forever. Like this is ours. So if we offer security, this is our company's number, these 6 alphanumeric digits. And then maybe this is our first one. And then the second 2 numbers is maybe this is number 2 or number 25 or number 26. This is how many times we've offered securities. This distinguishes which security you've offered. And then the last number, the 9th number, is a one picked by the computer, an algorithm to make sure that the other 8 are authentic. Looks nothing like a social security number. It looks nothing like the number on the back of your birth certificate. But the birth certificate number that they say is a QSIP number is actually different state by state. This is not a federalized number. The number on the back of your birth certificate depends on how your state decides to organize their birth certificates. And what this guy said, he said something about birth certificates are evil. No, they're not. We need those to go, hey, I'm an American citizen. And if there's not any proof that you're an American citizen, which, by the way, that's the biggest reason for your birth certificate, guess what? You don't have habeas corpus. Guess what? You don't get to enjoy the protections from our government. And that is what being a citizen does. Being a citizen protects you from your own government. So you do get habeas corpus. There's posse comitatus applies to you. You cannot get thrown in Gitmo, which is, goes against all of this this conspiracy theory stuff too. There's no Americans in Guantanamo Bay. As a matter of fact, they're not allowed to be held there, and that's by law. And so these numbers on the back of your birth certificates, they need you to be organized as a citizen, because if you're not a citizen, guess what? You're foreign. You're not part of America, and you don't get to claim the rights of an American citizen. So
Hey,
this
Mel,
idea that birth certificates are wrong, are bad, is evil. What, hon? What were it?
fun question. Do you remember what year the QSIP system was invented?
1970 something, I think.
It was 1964. It was updated.
1964.
It was updated in 1973.
Okay.
So if this whole dastardly plot started in 1871,
Yeah.
and the Vatican Bank wasn't created till the 1940s, and the QSIP system wasn't created till the 1960s.
Yep.
That's a bit of a problem with that argument. The timeline doesn't
None
match.
of the timelines match up ever.
So we talked about what a QSIP number. Well, we don't talk about the birth certificates, but the one point I wanted to make to your audience, Ron, I don't know if everybody knows about my background, but I've spent most of the last 20 plus years with the Bloomberg terminal sitting on my desk. That basically means I've got access to every bit of financial data that's available in the entire world with a Bloomberg terminal.
Wow.
I've typed in my birth certificate, QSIP numbers, you name it. This does not exist. It is not traded as a security. If it were, it would be available. This is what I did for a living for a long, long time. You cannot trade someone's birth certificate as a security. It doesn't exist. And there's faux websites where they say you type it in, it tells you how much you're worth.
Right.
Go look them up again and try cashing in on it. There is no trading market for it, period.
And they say, well, because it's on bond paper, therefore it's a bond. You can go down to any office supply, Office Depot, wherever, and buy bond paper. People use it for art. People use it for photography. People use it for, stuff at work that they want to have a better paper. But guess what? I found out your birth certificate is not even made on bond paper. They made a special paper just for your birth certificate that blows bond paper out of the water. So it's not even on bond paper. So there's that. It's not on the same paper that bonds are created on.
Holding Down Dixie said, cite Section 1 of the 13th Amendment and the second part of Section 1 of the 14th. And I'm not really quite sure why he wants to do that here. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Okay, so I get that part. Now, you said the second part of Section 1 of the 14th. So I'm just going to read it all here. All persons born naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the states wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Okay, so I'm not really quite sure why you wanted me to read those. If you holding down Dixie, let's see, and he says, it's all the language used to break down the words and cite law dictionaries. Law dictionaries. I look at the corporation. I look at the Constitution, and I don't see congruency in a lot of the statutes that abide by the Constitution. And I talked about that with that Napolitano thing. The people in Congress make laws, and they violate the Constitution all the time knowingly. And they write laws and to see if they get passed. And if they get passed, then they get passed. And then it's like, well, it's up to judges to revoke it. So just because the government is passing laws, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're congruent with what the with what the Constitution.
Well, that's why we have nullification.
Well, that's why we're supposed to have nullification.
We have nullification.
We're just not using it. We can do any of this. We're just not doing it.
Well, we are using it. Look at sanctuary cities. That's exactly what nullification is.
There you go.
This is the Democrats using.
I agree with that. That's and Missouri tried to do the same thing recently. It was more of a Second Amendment case where they wanted to be a sanctuary state from the federal government's laws on firearms.
Yeah.
And the federal government sued, and well, surprise, surprise, the federal courts found in favor of the federal government as opposed to the state.
Hey Ron, I gotta wrap up here. I'm at my 2-hour limit.
And I kind of need to go as well. I wish we could do this more and longer. I'm going to save all the comments in here and share the document with these two, so that we'll have a better idea of maybe some things that we can talk about the next time. Because I agree, their war hamster. I think we need to. This is something that we could probably do 3 or 4 or 5 shows and still not even scratch the surface. So, but I feel as though this is a really important issue, one that nobody really takes the time to delve into from our side. And a lot of people believe this because there's no pushback.
Right. Exactly. And also, before you guys go, or before we go, I don't know if you have the links to the book if anybody's interested in the research.
It's in the description.
Okay.
Both. I think I have your Amazon link and your other. No.
Please don't do the Amazon link.
No, I don't do the. I put your the other link.
Okay, good. Yeah, I don't want to support Amazon when I can not support Amazon.
No, listen, I completely understand.
Yeah.
So I completely understand.
It's actually an interesting conversation that came up today, Mel.
Yeah.
My company, we're basically created a free speech platform to get away from corporate tyranny and censorship. We had that, we're sitting there having a planning session today, and I asked the question to my business partner. I go, we started this 2 years ago when censorship and cancel culture was a thing. But after the victory of Donald Trump, and we saw Jeff Bezos, the owner of Amazon and the Washington Post, decline to endorse Kamala Harris, have we seen the end of corporate censorship? Is the tide turned? Maybe, but let's not let our guard down yet.
No,
I agree. Let's not let our guard down. But I agree that we are seeing a seismic shift in terms of. I believe we are seeing an unwinding of a lot of the nasty government stuff that we all despise.
Mm-hmm.
It's the beginning of a change. We got a lot of work to do, and
you got to realize that Rome wasn't built in a day. Neither was the United States. And where we are now, a lot of this crap. I know it sounds so awesome that if we could just wave a magic wand and make it all go back to the way it used to be. But I don't think that you would be able to achieve that without a severe cataclysmic event within society.
If I can promote myself before I sign off, Ron,
please do.
I am Brady, known in some very obscure corners of the internet as the War Hamster. You can find most of my material on Rumble at War Hamster, spelled exactly like it's supposed to. You can get me on X, also known as Twitter, at war_hamster1776, and I'm on True Social at war_hamster.
Yeah.
Actually, what might be a good thing to do, you mentioned it earlier, Mel, is spaces. Mm-hmm. Maybe it might be a good idea to do this in a spaces format where people can chime in. That
would be great. Absolutely. And I've done 3. Well, I did one space that I broke up into 3 segments because it was so long, but we actually debunked Gitmo. We debunked the capitulation tour. We debunked the corporation. We debunked several things. And those are on my Rumble as well, the Coach Mel show. But I would love to do a spaces. And if that would be fantastic. It's such a better, because you can talk to a large audience out there, and then you can open up microphones and you can go all night if you want. But yeah, I would love to do that.
Absolutely. And I know a couple of people that I can reach out to get like a spaces that would be in the thousands. So
and Ron, thanks to your audience. It was a good audience, a lot of good questions. And that's the whole reason we did this show, is because we know these questions are out there.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you don't believe us 100%, hopefully we gave you sources so you can read it for yourself. And
absolutely.
That's all we're really trying to do here tonight.
And I just like to say, as finishing off, this is information, guys, and I think right now, we all think that the left is hyper emotional when it comes to information, but the right is also emotional when it comes to information, because if we're saying things that you disagree with, you're kind of emotionally attached to your belief system, and all we're kind of asking you to do is to check your emotion at the door, analyze the information, and come to your own conclusion. Don't let other people do the thinking for you, and don't let other websites and say, hey, this is the way things are, and then you just subscribe to that notion, and then if anybody says anything contrary, then it's like, well, no, that's not what I believe because I heard somebody else say something else. So it really comes down to doing your own research and not relying on somebody else's research, and that's one of the reasons why we're trying to share the screen and share the documents and whatnot. So but on that note, guys, we're gonna cut it down here and go and let Melody and Brady enjoy their evenings, and I have to go as well. So thank you everybody for your participation. If in the future, we'll let you know when we're gonna do this again, and then we'll also let you know when we're gonna do this on a space. So thank you, guys. It was good to see you, Mel.
Thank you. You too. Good to see you guys. Let's do it again.
Without your gym clothes on.
Oh my gosh, that was so embarrassing. Wow.
Ron, thanks for having us. Mel, always a pleasure hanging out with you, my friend.
You too, dear.
Great to see you too. All right, guys. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.